We don't know who did this shooting, by the way, the Super Bowl shooting.
We have some idea.
What?
If it were a white man shooting, we'd know.
And Coulter points out one uncomfortable truth about the perpetrators of this crime. Bill Maher has his television show, and the panel is always kind of an interesting mix of political ideas and voices. Ann Coulter is one of the most famous voices on this show. In fact, she's pretty good friends with Bill Maher, believe it or not. That's right. Ann's very open-minded. She counts some lefties among her friends as well. And the two of them have Van Jones on the panel, and they're talking about the shooting at the end of the Kansas City Chiefs victory parade. And of course, Van Jones and Bill Maher are screaming about gun control, gun control. And then Ann Coulter points out one uncomfortable truth about the perpetrators of this crime.
I mean, we don't know who did this shooting, by the way, the Super Bowl shooting.
We have some idea.
What?
If it were a white man shooting, we'd know.
Well, we don't know. But they haven't.
That's how we know it's not a white man. I can tell you that much.
Do you think they were repressing that reporting?
They wouldn't tell us about the transgender woman that shot up the Christian school for what, like a year? San Bernardino out here. Remember the crazy terrorist Muslims? That's when I first noticed, they're not telling us who it is. It's not a white male. The longer they go without telling you, it's not a white male.
Okay, well, for this one, for right now, as of Friday night, February 16th,
We know.
We don't officially know. Okay, you have special powers.
Yeah, and actually she does have special powers. She's fantastic. Love me some Ann Coulter. But let's get to the crux of this. You saw Van Jones grinning and looking at the audience and sort of mugging it up and like, what a crazy whack job this is. You got Bill Maher, mocking her and patronizing her. Okay, you have special powers. Let's just be clear here. Toward the end of the week there was plenty of reporting that these were young minority teenagers who got into a dispute, started fighting with each other, and then a gun was drawn and shots were fired. We kept hearing from the media there and from the police, who actually made an announcement after the arrest, that these were juveniles involved in a dispute. But they wouldn't tell us the race of it, as if it's not important. But of course, as Ann Coulter points out here, whenever it's a white assailant, it is important. Why? Because there's a narrative in the media that the most dangerous criminal, the most dangerous terrorist group in America are angry white men, angry white young men. Why is it so many angry white young men are shooting up public assemblies and schools and malls and movie theaters? The plague of the angry white man, because they want to make angry white men look like some kind of terrorist. And listen, if they have statistics that show that, go ahead and bring them to the table. But what they're doing here in this case, and what they do in so many other cases, as Ann just pointed out, is that they sequester information if it doesn't fit that narrative, if it isn't the so-called angry white man who goes and shoots people. You see, if it's just a bunch of young black kids who get into a fight at a football game's victory parade and then they start shooting each other, that's apparently not newsworthy. Well, they mocked her, they made fun of her, they ridiculed her, and then literally the very next day, TMZ had video. We've got some screenshots here of it from our friend Andy No. This is footage that people were taking of themselves and their friends and each other celebrating the Kansas City Chiefs. But in the background, you can see the fight starting to break out. And as you can see, the suspects here are young black men. You can see this one right here reaching into his coat. It appears to pull out a gun. You can also see that a couple of them are wearing bandanas across their face to hide their identity. You see this one here has that too, because of the pandemic. In other words, the very next day, TMZ confirmed Ann Coulter's superpowers. Now, the reason the news media has suddenly stopped identifying the race of violent criminals, if that race happens to be African American, is because they've been bullied and intimidated into this false notion that they are perpetuating a myth that young black men are automatically supposed to be feared because they're potential violent criminals. This is about the culture in the news media and Hollywood constantly depicting discussing and displaying young black men as angry, violent criminals. And you're just perpetuating this myth, and it feeds into systemic racism. That's what they've been told. And so they've just stopped reporting it. They've stopped reporting the news. And Van Jones shaking his head at Ann Coulter saying, this is just there. You're ridiculous. In fact, he was going right up to the line. And so was Bill Maher, saying that Ann Coulter was racist for saying an obvious truth. They were mocking her, and they were going right up to the line of calling her racist because she was conveying an obvious truth. And that is, whenever the suspect or perpetrator in a crime like this is white, they are Johnny on the spot reporting the name, the face. They put it all over the place, and then they have hours and hours of analysis about it. Oh, what are we going to do? If they sequester the news of the assailant and they don't tell you their names or their race, then you should just assume that, well, they're not white. But here's the irony. That's actually the most racist thing you can do. You see the media choosing to determine that it's not newsworthy. When the media decides that it's not newsworthy, that a violent criminal who's responsible for putting 10 children in the hospital and murdering a person in cold blood at the Kansas City Chiefs NFL victory parade, when they determine that it's not newsworthy because those suspects are black, that's actually racist, right? Think about it for a minute. Oh, geez, well, they're black, so there's no news there. What do you expect, right? That's what they're conveying by not actually reporting the news. Like, all right, we've got a shooting at the Kansas City Chiefs victory parade. We've got 1 dead, and we've got 10 children in the hospital. Oh my God, that's a huge story. Well, what can you tell us about the suspects? Well, it's 4 young black teenagers. Oh, well, that's not news. Go ahead and report about the shooting, but keep the information about the race of the suspect sequestered. That's literally racist. And that actually perpetuates stereotypes. It's not newsworthy because it's what we expect. It's disgusting. And Ann Coulter then turned to Van Jones and said, you constantly throw these numbers out and these statistics out about how dangerous it is for black people in the inner city and various neighborhoods because of violence. But you never talk about the fact that most of it ends up being what's now referred to as black on black crime. Watch how that conversation went.
The media who do not care about blacks killing blacks. And this is the one time where I think, you always hear pretty white girl, they'll cover that. No, the blacks killing blacks will not get covered by the media. That's a huge media problem. And you'll all laugh at me, but I'm going to say it because I'm right.
Very right.
Because of this
Far right.
is illegitimacy. All of these young men do not have fathers. And that is a huge, huge source of it. Anything that could be done to reduce the illegitimacy rate, particularly among the black community, it would be astronomical, the changes you'd see. Do you know, just one fact, if you take away the factor of illegitimacy, the difference in the black and the white crime rate disappears. It's an amazing fact.
It would be an amazing fact if it were true, but
well, real fast, just in case anyone doesn't know who Van Jones is, it's kind of funny for him to be sitting up there on the altar and throne of truth and lies and determining what is true. By the way, it is true. When you add that one factor in, the idea of a young black man growing up in a household with a father in an intact family versus growing up without a father in the home, the odds of the child turning to a life of violent crime or not is astronomically off the charts. That is true, Van Jones. And by the way, this is Van Jones, whose main claim to fame was being the Obama administration's climate czar, because, that climate policy is always about truth and no political agenda or propaganda, right? And then it was discovered he had to lose his job because he had signed a petition about the 9/11 truth campaign. He was a 9/11 truther. He thought that the World Trade Center terror attacks was an inside job. So here's Van Jones rendering a verdict of truth and lies on someone like Ann Coulter. But we'll let him finish here because I'm sure he has something very important to say.
Well, it is a big part of it.
Listen, I've got 2 very small children. I've got my eye on this problem a lot. I'm trying to raise, black kids here in Los Angeles. I'm not a part of the pro-crime lobby.
Yeah, well, and that's good. I'm glad that he put it that way because in his party there is a pro-crime lobby. They're the people who want to put criminals back out on the streets. But the question to Van Jones is, you are raising 2 children right now. Do you think that your 2 children that you're raising as a responsible father in the home, do you think they have the same odds as turning into a gang member or a drug dealer or a violent criminal on the streets as a child who is growing up in the same city of Los Angeles without a father in the home? Do you think you make no difference in those child's life? You think that there's absolutely you have the exact same odds your kids could turn to a life of crime? Who knows? Well, I mean, if they go into politics or the media, I guess they will have turned to a life of crime. But you get the point. And when you look at that table right there, and you've got Ann Coulter saying, listen, you're going to laugh at me, you're going to yell at me, you're going to call me names, but I'm going to say it because it's true. Illegitimacy is the major factor here that's causing this violent crime, and especially black on black crime. You've got Ann Coulter saying we need to fix that and we'll save lives. And you've got Van Jones just shrugging it off and laughing and saying that it's a lie. Which one of those 2 people really care about the black lives that are being lost in these cities? Who of those 2 people really do believe that black lives matter? Like, not as a political slogan, but actually as an idea of compassion. All right, a little bit more here because she's just so good. The debate then turned to guns, of course.
And why there is such a big disparity between what people say they want and what the law is in a state like this.
Well, the disparity has a special name called the NRA. That's the source of it. There is an organized gun lobby that's not about the gun owners. Gun owners, frankly, agree with some of those numbers. It's the gun manufacturers that are the number one source of the money into the NRA, and people are still scared to take these votes. As bad as
Didn't the NRA just go bankrupt?
Yes.
well, now that's what I'm saying.
It's not the NRA.
I guarantee you'll see a difference going forward.
Yeah, this is just lazy punditry. This is punditry from 15 years ago. Well, they're all afraid of the NRA. And thank God Bill Maher is like, wait, what are you talking about the NRA? They literally are a non-entity at this point. They literally have no money. They're not running any ads anymore anywhere. There's no lobbying effort from the NRA. By the way, it's because people like Van Jones and his pals and George Soros-backed groups that are anti-gun, they sued the NRA for being political activists. It's outrageous. It's disgusting. It's outside of the bounds of the First Amendment. And by the way, instead of just sitting here whining about it, it's frankly something that conservatives should start doing. We should start suing. You know, when a child is forced into a transgender transition against the parents' knowledge and against the parents' will, and that child is now, sterile and wants to sue the hospitals, we should also sue the Human Rights Campaign, the advocacy. They're the NRA of transgender procedures. You put those people out of business. They put our conservative groups out of business. We put them out of business. But back to this point, the NRA has nothing to do with this. They just use that. That's just lazy Van Jones 15 years ago punditry. The NRA literally isn't doing anything. The fact of the matter is gun laws aren't passed. Gun restriction laws aren't passed. Laws infringing people's Second Amendment rights aren't passed for 2 reasons. The first is they are challenged in court and they end up getting overturned because of the Second Amendment in the Constitution. These gun grabbers, the only way they can do what they really want to do is to repeal the Second Amendment and confiscate every guns. That's the only way. And they do want to do that. If you scratch the surface of a gun grabber, you'll hear them say, for instance, ask them like, okay, tell me where in the world, what country has the policies that you think would be the correct policy that you would want to duplicate here? And they'll almost always say, I'm sure you've heard them say, we should look at what Australia did. Look at, and no reporter ever follows up on that. They always say, Hillary said it, Biden has said it, Obama said it. They go, well, we should really look carefully at what Australia did. And no reporter follows up and said, well, sir or ma'am, Australia literally went door to door and confiscated everybody's gun. And now it's illegal to own a gun. So when you say we should look at what Australia did, what you're saying is you want to repeal the Second Amendment. That's the only thing they can do. So there's 2 reasons why these gun laws never go anywhere. Number one, if they are passed in a state like California, they'll end up getting challenged in court and the courts will overturn it because of the Constitution. The second reason these laws don't go anywhere is because we, the people, don't want them. We recognize that there is violent crime out there. We recognize that guns are used for those violent crimes. It's why we want to have our guns to defend ourselves, number one. And number two, it's why we know that your laws are meaningless. Because I assure you, those juveniles in Kansas City, we're not allowed to talk about or even discuss in any way whatsoever because, we've got 10 people in the hospital and we've got one person killed. But, who did it, why they did it, where they got the gun, what their motives were, and why they're in the violent criminal state that they're in, that's meaningless. We don't need to care about that. We just want to confiscate the guns. Well, I guarantee you that those juveniles who just shot up 10 kids and murdered a woman would not stop and think, oh, wait a minute, I better not use this gun right now and break the law against murder because that would be against the law with regard to gun possession. I just think that if a criminal is willing to break the law that has been on the books since before we were even a country against homicide, they're going to be okay breaking the law against gun possession. We need more gun laws because then the criminals will really pay attention. Those people who are currently killing each other will stop killing each other because they'll be afraid of being punished for buying a gun. You've got to be a brain-dead liberal to use that kind of logic. All right. The conversation then went beyond violent crime and black-on-black crime in Kansas City and race. It then went to the border. And since Anna's so good, we just figured we'd let her have the last word here when they debated the border on the Bill Maher show. Let's go, Ann Coulter. Bring us home, baby.
It turns out there is a conspiracy to keep the border open, to flood the country with undocumented people. And it's led by Donald Trump and the Republican Party because it's down their open border. They have the opportunity to close it. People, we've been hearing from the right that there's a political agenda here. That's why we have all these undocumented people here. Well, it turns out there is a political agenda here to not just solve the problem, but to weaponize it and use it against Democrats. And I think we have a healthy party. You could break with Biden and not get beat up on Twitter or X or whatever they call it. You could run to your own district. You can talk about these issues and get elected. The problem that you have is on the other side. If you don't march lockstep with everything that Donald Trump says, you will get destroyed by Donald Trump if they keep nominating bad folks. But I'm very curious to hear, are you, how ashamed are you that the Republican Party flipped on its own issue?
The people who should be ashamed at this table is anyone who believes that was a good border bill or that the Democrats care about the border.
Well,
that was a good response. So I take it back. You have the governor of Texas putting up razor wire on the border. And what does Joe Biden do? He sends federal agents to cut it down. Yeah, that's a guy who wants to get tough on the border. Exactly.
Yeah, but that was a really good sneak peek into the whole purpose of this stupid bill that Republicans in the Senate were stupid enough to even sit down at the negotiating table and discuss, because it was a losing battle. And all they did was give Joe Biden and Van Jones and every other Democrat and liberal this fake talking point that sadly too many brain dead voters and uneducated voters who don't watch this program and just watch Bill Maher will actually believe. And that is, they could have fixed it. But Donald Trump and the Republicans said no. And of course, the bill that they passed didn't have anything to do with fixing it. It actually established into law the very problem that we're still dealing with and will continue to deal with. The American people who are paying attention know better. And it's a good answer. Good job, Ann Coulter. We actually do like Ann Coulter. Ann Coulter has run out of F's to give, and we like that about her. And she's willing to walk into that room and sit. And here's the thing. I know a lot of people who are angry at Ann Coulter right now because she's got so many mean things to say about Donald Trump. And listen, I don't agree with Ann Coulter with everything that she says. What I love about her is that she will say what's on her mind, regardless of what you feel about it, regardless of how you're going to react. She's not going to pander to you just to get a happy, warm, fuzzy reaction from you. And that means you get to see Ann Coulter walk into that room and say what she said to Bill Maher and Van Jones and the vast audience that they've got here of mostly left-wing liberals who never hear those kind of truths. But it also means that, in her opinion, when Trump is ineffective at his job, you're going to hear that from her too. And frankly, I'd rather have someone like Ann Coulter speaking her mind than somebody like Ann Coulter only speaking her mind in one direction on issues.